What's up, YouTube family? You're back on the other side with Mike G, and tonight I'm bringing you the story of a true pioneer of MMA. He started his career in 1996 and is a veteran of the UFC, WEC, Pride Fighting Championship, Bellator, Pancrase, IFL, IFC, and King of the Cage. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Gumby Horn. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the channel. I hope everybody who sees this knows who you are, but I'm not going to lie. You're probably not the most popular fighter today. So I'm going to take it all the way back to the beginning. I would like for you to tell me about growing up with mom and three other siblings. What was that like?
Well, I mean, it was pretty similar to what you would expect any childhood, I guess. I mean, my older brothers were 4 and 5 years older than me, so I pretty much got beat up constantly. I think that's part of the reason I ended up being relatively tough as a fighter, because like 4 and 5 years older is old enough that it's basically an adult and a child, but close enough that you're still like your brothers. So, a 15-year-old beating up a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, that's basically a man and a boy.
Yeah.
But it's still close enough that mom just says, "Hey, stop fighting, go out in the yard." She's not going to separate them. So
Go outside.
Yeah. So
how I read a quote, and correct me if I'm wrong. You were a bit of a belligerent child.
Yeah, I don't know. I think every child has a little bit of a belligerent streak, but mostly I just kept to myself. I started a paper out when I was like 8, and then found martial arts when I was 12, and that kind of soaked up most of my time. So I didn't do a whole lot else.
What particular discipline did you find first?
So I actually started studying at a local gym. It was in Omaha under a guy named Dave Jobin, who was part of an organization that was run by a guy named Robert Bussey. So back in the 80s and 90s, he was super popular. Back in the whole ninja craze, that's kind of where he got his start, I guess you'd say. But yeah, it was a fairly all-encompassing style. Back then, a lot of styles were, it was either Taekwondo that did one thing, and karate that did another, and judo that did another. And Robert Bussey had a fairly eclectic style, a little bit of everything, a little bit of striking, a little bit of grappling, a little bit of the traditional weapons. You still see those in martial arts. So it was actually a pretty good foundation for what would later become MMA.
How do you transition from that to Militich fighting systems?
Well, so like I said, the style itself, the gym we trained at was kind of a mixture of everything. It was kind of a self-defense based style. So it was pretty, all encompassing. If you're on the ground, don't get stomped on, that kind of thing. So when the UFC rolled around, me and a handful of my people that we were training together kind of recognized it as kind of the next level of what we were already doing. We wanted to do that. And so I honestly don't know how I first got in touch with Monty. The first time I had anything to do with him, I actually fought on one of his shows.
Okay.
My second and third fight were on it was called the Ultimate, God, what was it now? Ultimate Combat something. But yeah,
was it UFC?
No, that was a local one here in Utah. Monty was back in Iowa. Ultimate, yeah, man, I have to look it up. I think it's listed somewhere on a poster or something. But so that was it was a tournament he did. It was a 4-man tournament. So my second and third fight were for him, and Pat was the main event on that show.
Okay.
So, after fighting, we all hung out for a little bit, and we ended up training together a little bit next day. Just hit it off, and realized that was really where I needed to go to train and continue to improve. So I started making trips out there. I'd go out there on the weekends and stay with Pat for the weekend and train with them. And then after about, 6 months, maybe a year of that, I just decided to move out there full time.
Okay. I read somewhere that you made your pro debut in 1996 in a warehouse in Atlanta. Is that true?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So that was actually the fight. I've seen it on YouTube. It's available somewhere.
Okay.
It's under a really weird title, so you got to do a lot of scouring to find it, but it's there. So I don't I don't really know how we heard about this. So you said you're kind of an old school MMA fan, right? Do you
Definitely.
remember a show called Mars?
No.
So you're not that
No.
old school. So this was the show. It was that was an acronym. It stood for Martial Arts Reality Superstars,
Okay.
MARS. And you probably have heard of the fight, but in it they had an 8-man tournament, and the final was Tom Erickson against Murillo Bustamante.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was that tournament.
Okay.
And this was before that tournament, and this guy was actually just kind of looking for fighters that might be interested in that, or maybe as an alternate. They actually had another 8-man tournament to find the alternates for that tournament.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't televise that one. My buddy Mark Hansen, who actually I ended up fighting in the finals when I fought for Monty, he was in that, and he ended up winning the alternate tournament, I guess you'd say. So anyway, this guy was looking around. I believe his name was Tom Huggins, I think. He was looking around, just looking for fighters that wanted to kind of try out for this show.
Sure.
And so they were just flying people down to Atlanta, and they just had this big warehouse set up where people would go fight. It was really kind of scary. The sport was still pretty new. Nobody really knew what was going on. And this guy calls us and goes, "Hey, do you want to fight? We're going to do these fights down here. Let's try out for this bigger show." And it was later to become Mars, but we didn't know that at the time. And he said, "Okay, we'll fly you to Atlanta. We'll put you up in a hotel." That's really all they said. So there's 3 of us, me, my brother, and Brian Dunn. Flew out to Atlanta. They stick us in a hotel. The next day they show up with a limo and like, "All right, we're going to the fights." So we pile into the car. We drive down into like the ghetto district of Atlanta in the middle of the night, and they unload us in front of this warehouse. Like I honestly was starting to think that we were like walking into a snuff film or something. It was really scary.
A trap.
Because it's just like, it wasn't like a venue like you'd see today where like you come at 4 PM and you get set up with the doctor. And this was like just a car dropped us off in a warehouse district in the middle of Atlanta somewhere. And so we walked into this giant warehouse, like just like you'd see out of the movies, with like corrugated metal roof and like
dirty, wet,
light bulb hanging from the from a chain in the ceiling. We walk in there and there's people, like no joke, in tuxedos and evening gowns drinking champagne out of tall glasses.
What?
They were friends of the guys that were putting this on, and they were just there to watch fights. To them, it was just an underground fight. So they got this area set up. There was no ring, and they had just, I don't know, maybe 20 by 40 mats laid out, like a 20 by 40 foot square.
Sure.
And they had no ring, and they're like, "Okay, that's where you're going to fight. Here's the referee." And they basically just started pairing people off. They said, "Okay, you guys are about the same size, so you guys will fight. And you guys are about the same size, so you guys will fight." Nobody knew anybody. Nobody knew who was who.
Right.
And then they had half a dozen guys with like those old school, like kind of gladiator looking kicking shields, like from the old Taekwondo days.
Yeah.
And they would just run around the outside of the mat and like shove you back in, like American gladiators used to do. If you got too far out, they just bump you back in.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. I thought we were going to fight, and then they were going to kill us and throw us in a ditch. Like it was kind of creepy.
That's nuts. Now, is this NHB or is this Unified Rules?
No, this was NHB. I think they still went by like no biting and no eye gouging, but that's it. Everything else was legal.
Gotcha. The slightly Americanized NHB. Yep. Okay. You made your UFC debut way back at UFC 17.
Yes.
Fighting for the light heavyweight belt against Frank Shamrock. Now, I've seen a lot of really tough debuts. Sean Salmon versus Rashad Evans. That's a tough debut. I don't think there's a tougher debut than that.
I actually kind of had my entire progression through the sport of MMA. It's been kind of like one, I'm not sure what the right word is, not lucky, but like one fortunate event after another that kind of helped me like sidestep any anxiety or any issues or anything like that. So certainly first fight in the UFC, that's a really, back then it wasn't that big of a show. It was It was a little bigger than local shows, but like I got paid $2,500 for that fight, right? I got paid more for other fights that were local, right? So I mean, it's not, and yes, it was pay-per-view, yes, it was filmed, yes, it was bigger, but as far as fights go, it really wasn't that much bigger yet.
Right.
So that wasn't that big a deal. But then fighting Frank, like I had seen him fight, I knew who he was, but I didn't really feel any pressure going into that fight because his last 2 fights before that were Igor Zinoviev and Kevin Jackson. And he beat both of them in 30 seconds each. And I just knew, like, nobody's beating me in 30 seconds.
Right.
So, I mean, they knew they were bringing me in to lose. I knew that. They didn't expect anything from me, but I thought, man, I can last longer than them. Guarantee that.
There you go.
So, again, so still, like, really no stress. Nobody expected me to win. I didn't expect to win.
Right.
I knew I could last longer than them. So, as far as I'm concerned, I did my job.
Sure.
That was my mindset going into it. So, there's really no anxiety. I didn't care. They didn't expect me to win. I didn't think I was going to win. I was just going to go in there and do my best. And as long as I lasted longer than a minute, I'm like, I did what they wanted,
Right.
So that's part of the reason that I kind of fought the way I did because, the fight starts, we come together, he throws a kick, I grab his leg, scoop him up and slam him. And, it kind of went through my head. I'm like, holy shit, I just body slammed Frank Shamrock. That was luck. Any minute now, he's going to turn it on and he's going to beat me. I'm just going to hang on and I'm going to last as long as I can.
Right.
And then he tried to do something and I defended it and went to the mount. And I was like, okay, he wasn't paying attention. Any minute now, he's going to turn it on and he's going to smoke me. I'm just going to hang on and just try to survive. And just kept going that one after another. I'm like, okay, he didn't see that coming. Okay, he wasn't paying attention. I just kept making excuses for why I was beating him. And the truth of the matter is I was just better than him.
Right.
And then finally we go into the second overtime. And finally I'm like, you know what? This guy's not holding anything back. He's not better than me. I can beat him. So I go in there. I get a little over aggressive. I get a sloppy takedown. And then he catches my leg. So,
Hey, like you said, past 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it was really not a whole lot of stress going into the fight because I knew I could give them what they wanted. I can give them a fight longer than 30 seconds,
Yeah.
So,
UFC 19, Chuck Liddell. How did that one go? One of my favorite fights ever. You and Chuck are 2 of my favorite fighters ever.
Yeah, that was a tough fight. I still was fairly new as far as fighting goes. I mean, I was pretty good on the ground. Certainly for that day, I think I was pretty good. But my wrestling was pretty bad. My striking was pretty bad. I wasn't really training. I was training hard with the guys in Iowa, but still, and even beyond that, like I trained because it was fun.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays, modern fighters train and they treat it like it's a job, or at least the good ones do, where like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to diet. I don't want to run. I don't want to do these drills that I'm not good at, but I have to, because I have to make sure that I am as complete a fighter as I can be. And I have to do these things. Back then I didn't do that.
Right.
I didn't want to do something. I just didn't do it. I don't want to do takedowns. Takedowns suck. I'll just work on the ground. I'll just sloppily dive for your feet. And once we get to the ground, I'll go to work, because that's what I like to do.
Right.
And so going into that fight, obviously with Chuck, he had way more experience than me as far as striking goes and wrestling, certainly. So I was just having a hell of a time just getting him down and, kind of a big eye opener. And then eventually, once I got a hold of him and got on top of him, then I was able to put some work in. And even then, he kind of made a little mistake when he bridged, and I was able to get that choke. But so it's just still just kind of stumbling through and having fun, not really treating it like a career.
Stumbling through a fight with Chuck Liddell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just my whole career, I just like. Have you seen the movie Step Brothers?
Oh yeah.
I always kind of think of it like that, when he's like, "Did we just become best friends?" And he goes, "You want to go do karate in the garage?" That's just kind of what I felt like.
Gotcha.
I go to the gym and I train with my buddies, and then I go lift, and then I go home and play video games. That's all I do every day. I'm just going to play karate in the garage with my friends. And then every now and then I go into the ring and fight, and they pay me for it. I'm like, this This
Perfect.
is a dream come true, you know. So
Is that Chuck's only submission loss? I feel like it is.
I think probably so, yeah.
Pretty impressive, man. Tell me about fighting Big Nog at WEF 8 going platinum.
Yeah. That was another one. Didn't, again, just because of the way I kind of treated my career as like not really a career, just me having fun with my friends. And that was one that, like, do you train yourself?
Not in a very long time.
So
Injury.
What I find happens a lot is different people have different styles that are kind of like their Achilles heel, at least mentally, you know. And it's more mental than in actuality, and maybe not so much anymore. But like some of the guys that I trained with were really, really good jiu-jitsu guys, and they hated fighting wrestlers because a good wrestler would just stall them out. And so going into a fight with a wrestler, they're like, oh man, how am I going to beat this guy? I'm like, dude, he's just a wrestler. Just fucking submit him. It's easy, you know? Or some people are like, well, I'm a good jiu-jitsu guy, but man, I don't want to fight a kickboxer because if I can't, you know, and it gets into their head and it ruins them. Well, for me, it was jiu-jitsu guys. Me being one, I'm like, look, I don't want to fight a jiu-jitsu guy because he's good at what I'm good at. I don't like that. Right? You put me in there with a wrestler, kickboxer, I don't care. Once I drag you to the ground, you're done. But going in there fighting Nogueira, I was like, man, this guy is better than me at what I'm good at. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to beat him because I wasn't good enough on my feet to really make a big push there. I wasn't a good enough wrestler to try to stop him and stop him from taking me down. So I knew I was going to have to work on the ground, and he's a world champion, you know?
Yeah.
So it was really hard for me to get any kind of motivation to train for that fight. Actually, that was one of the few times in my career where I actually wasn't going to the gym a lot. I was out riding my bicycle a lot, just jacking around, just having fun, and just kind of trying to ignore the fact that I was heading into a fight with a guy that's arguably better than me at what I'm supposed to be best at. And then same thing happened. I go into the fight and he wasn't that good. I was like, damn it, why didn't I train harder for this? Because now I'm tired, and I probably could have beat him if I had taken this fight seriously. And still, a lot of people think I did win that fight. It was a pretty close decision, but certainly I got tired, and you know I paid for the lack of training going into that fight. So live and learn.
Yeah. Do you feel like there have been multiple times in your career that, like you said, with the Chuck or the Frank fight, you felt like you were brought in basically to lose? Do you think that has happened more than once?
You know, I think probably so. If I were to go back and really scrutinize the fights that I had, I'm sure there was more than a handful. But I was, you know, I think maybe I was. I don't want to sound arrogant here. I was pretty good, and I was maybe a little ahead of the curve when it came to jiu-jitsu and fighting. So I was usually the better fighter. You know, or at least I was even, you know. I mean, I don't think it very often where they're like, let's just grab this kid and throw him to the wolves. You know, I was usually the wolves, you know, so, or at least it was an even match, you know.
Right. In 2000 at Rings King of Kings, you fought Randy Couture.
Yes.
Another one of my, I end up in these interviews every time telling the person they're one of my favorite fighters, and everyone they fought is one of my favorite fighters, but everyone is my favorite fighters. Tell me about fighting Randy. I think he's a lot of people. Everyone loves Randy.
Yeah, Randy's a great guy. And I knew him. Yeah, I knew him at that point. Like, we weren't good buddies, but I knew who he was, and we had crossed paths at a lot of fights and seen him, and, you know, real friendly guy. And so I kind of knew what I was up against in that fight. And same kind of thing. Like, I'm looking at Randy and I'm like, all right, whatever, he's a wrestler. Like, I'll be able to submit him. You know,
right.
His striking is decent. But, you know, his submission game is probably the weakest area where he is, at least back then it was. And so I figured if I can get him to the ground, I'll be able to submit him. And he just did a really good job of pushing the pace and wearing me out and kind of stalling me out. And are you familiar with the Rings rules?
No.
They had kind of a unique set of rules, and Rings was actually a pretty unique organization. Early on, like most of the Japanese organizations, Rings had a lot of fixed fights.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this or the people that watch this know this, but Japan has a love for pro wrestling. They
Mm-hmm.
love it. They love the theatrics. It's pro wrestling is huge over there, way bigger
Yeah.
than it is over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so the crossover for them between pro wrestling and real fighting is a very blurred line for them. They don't really care. As
Yeah.
long as it's an entertaining match, they don't really
Yep.
care if it's a real fight or if it's a fixed fight. That just looks
Yeah.
like a real fight because they just love entertainment.
Yeah.
And so rings would do a lot in their early days. They would do a lot of fixed fights.
Okay.
And I mean, to call it fixed is a little, maybe that's not really a fair description because, the outcome was predetermined, but these guys are beating the hell out of each other.
Sure.
Imagine going in, and going into the gym and training with your buddies and be like, look, we're going to have a really, really hard sparring match. Like we're going to try not to like knock each other's teeth out, but we're
Mm-hmm.
going to beat the hell out of each other. We're going to make this
Wow.
a hard match. And then after 20 minutes, you're going to submit me. But everything before that is kind of up in the air. We're just going to go at it a little bit. We're not going to hurt each other, but we're going to, and so that's what a lot of their matches were like. And so guys they'd get roughed up, they'd get banged up a little bit, and then somebody would win. So rings would do that. And they had a unique rule set where if you wanted to punch somebody in the face, you had to wear gloves. But if you didn't want to punch, you didn't have to wear gloves. You just had to do like the whole pancrase open hand thing, right? So some people wore gloves, some people didn't. Same thing. If you want to throw knees and elbows, you had to wear knee and elbow pads. But if you didn't want to throw those techniques, you didn't have to wear those pads. And when you hit the ground, there was no striking the head at all.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a unique idea because what they wanted to do and what they kind of encouraged was on your feet, a very dynamic kickboxing match, basically, for the people that wore gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were more of a grappler, you could slap people, you could set up your takedowns, and then on the ground, because no striking or limited striking, they assumed that it would be just a very dynamic, scramble-oriented grappling match, and a lot of times they did. So some of the early matches were really entertaining because you get these guys that were just really, like Imanari. I'm sure you know that. He kind of had that style. I believe he had a few fights in rings early on where just super aggressive on the ground because he's used to not getting hit, and then he transitioned to Pride and Ryzen and some of the others. But early on, that style is what encouraged some of these fighters to be super aggressive on the ground because they're not getting hit. And then on the feet, some wanted to be, have decent striking. Some wanted to just do takedowns. So it really kind of encouraged a potential for a lot of exciting fights. And then,
I'll have to check that out. That's a cool skill set or a rule set.
Yeah, and they had a lot of the Russians, a lot of Eastern Bloc countries because of their sambo background. They would go in there and kickboxing and whatnot. That's actually where Fedor got his start as well. Was in rings. That's another story. It's kind of funny. But what ended up happening is as the UFC and MMA started getting more popular, rings decided to kind of start creeping into the world of real fights. Nothing fixed, because they would do like rope escapes, right? You go into submission, I grab the rope, I lose a point, but the fight continues.
Okay.
So it'd be like, 3 or 4 points to lose a match. Well, then they're like, okay, we're going to do MMA, and guys started getting knocked out. You can't grab a rope from a knockout.
Yeah.
Guys would get caught in submissions and stuff, and they'd get hurt. So they started creeping more and more towards MMA, and what ended up happening is guys would come in that were MMA guys, and they would make the fights boring. Because now I'm going to take you down, and I'm going to just bury my head in your chest. I'm going to punch you in the ribs, and it's going to be a boring fight, but I'm going to win a decision.
Yeah.
Right. And so the Rings organization eventually kind of folded up. That King of Kings tournament they did was their first full tournament with full MMA fights.
Okay.
So everything before that you can see was do that. So I ended up fighting Randy, and you see we had gloves on. We were both punching, but on the ground, not allowed to punch him in the head. So, they wanted more submissions, and it was, punch to the body and stuff like that. Excuse me. So it's a fun fight. Marnie will tell you, he kind of screwed me over in that fight because we had a lot of interaction with the Japanese organizations, a lot of their judges and referees and stuff, and they didn't really understand how decisions were supposed to work. So typically, you have 3 judges. If two fighters have it a draw, or I'm sorry, 2 judges have it a draw, and the third fighter gives it to fighter A, how would you score that fight?
I would score it a draw.
Right. It's a majority draw.
Yeah.
Japan used to score it for the fighter.
That had the one?
Right. 2 judges called it a draw. One judge picks fighter A, then fighter A wins. And so
I can see the logic.
Yeah, there's a little bit of logic there, but it should be the majority, right? So, the show before that, Monty sat down with Maeda, the owner and head guy, and all the officials. And he goes, "Look, you guys are doing this wrong. You're not doing this right. If the judges score, blah blah blah." And he kind of explained it the way they're supposed to be. And so I go 3 rounds with Randy. 2 judges had a draw. 1 judge gave it to me. And so Monty's the one that screwed me out of winning that fight.
Monty.
The fight to me.
That's terrible.
We're doing overtime because it's a draw. So we go to overtime. He wins the overtime round because I was exhausted. So he moves on. So
thanks, Monty.
Yeah.
In 2003, you beat an up-and-coming prospect named Forrest Griffin.
Yes.
Tell me about fighting Forrest. He's one of the coolest dudes ever.
He very much is. Yeah, he wasn't very well known then. I kind of knew who he was. He was, if I remember correctly, that was right around the time that he was getting ready for, maybe just after the Ultimate Fighter. So
I think it was just before.
Yeah. So that was actually, everybody asked me what my favorite fight was, and I always tell them the same one. It's that one. Because for any competitive athlete can relate to this. Whether you win or lose a fight, you can always look back afterwards and say, well, I should have done this better. I could have done this better. I missed this opportunity. You always pick apart your performance, particularly when you win, right? It's always easier to look back when you lose and pick it apart. But in that fight with Forrest, I think I came as close as I ever have to fighting to the potential that I feel like I actually have. There's one fighter you get in the gym, training, sparring with your buddies.
Sure.
Where you're calm, you're relaxed, you're confident, everything's, firing on all cylinders and everything feels great. And then you go into the fight and you're nervous and you're anxious and you're scared to lose and everything, and you fight at 30% or 40% what you're capable of, the better you are, the more you can reach that higher potential, And in that fight, man, I feel like that was the closest I've ever come. That whole night, except for the final, that whole night, I just feel like everything was coming together better than it ever has or ever since in my entire career. So
awesome. Yeah, that was early. I don't think Forrest had I think about a year before that he was still knocking in doors for the police.
Yeah, I remember correctly. Yeah.
You are one, I think maybe the only person in the world that can say they've beat Chael Sonnen 3 times. What's that like?
Well, so Nikki, take him. That's another one that's kind of a unique one. So our first fight, I had an opponent. I was fighting on Monty's card. I was supposed to fight Curtis Stout. I don't know if you remember him. He fought in the UFC a couple times, talented guy. He ended up getting hurt. And so Monty was looking for a replacement. And I don't know how he got a hold of Chael. I think he probably knew Randy and the Team Quest guys from back then. And said, hey, I'm looking for an opponent. So Chael took the fight on like a week or two's notice and filled in to fight me. And so I ended up winning. I hit him with a really nasty elbow. If you look at that jagged scar he's got on his forehead, that's
okay, nice. Yeah.
It's kind of funny. So I shoot in, I grab him, I pick him up, and I take him down. And I'm in his guard on top, and I come over the top, and I hit him with a really nasty elbow. That's one of the things I do really well. And it sounded like a home run getting knocked out of the park. It was bad.
Crack.
I hit him, and then I bury my head in his belly, and I look up, and I go, are you okay? And he goes, yeah, I'm good. And then I look a little closer, and I see just a fountain of blood coming out of his head. It was nasty. So the referee stops it right away, and that's all there was. So
that's
then,
hilarious.
Several months later, he has a fight for Sport Fight. And his opponent gets hurt.
Okay.
So Monty calls me on like a week or 2 weeks notice. Like, hey, you want to pay him back? He filled in to fight you late. You want to do it again? I'm like, sure, I'll do it again. So I go out there again and I beat him again. And then the third fight in the UFC, that was the only one where we were actually scheduled to fight each other. We both actually knew it going into it, and were able to train for it. So,
where would you put Chael on the list of greatest trash talkers? Not in just MMA history, but in all of fight history. Would you put him above Ali? Is Ali first? Connor? How would you do it? I honestly think Chael's the best.
I would say he's got to be. He's definitely up there. I don't know if he is the best. I would say he's the best, except that I don't really know boxing that well. So there might be somebody better than him in boxing. But as far as MMA goes, yeah, he's head and shoulders above the rest. His ability and his wit and his intellect
he's brilliant. I will in 20 years I will laugh if I watch the clip of him talking about Big Nog feeding the carrot to the bus and Little Nog petting it. That man.
So my buddy Sean O'Connell used to do an MMA show here locally on the local radio station, and Chael was a guest one time, called in and was talking to him. And I don't think Chael knew that Sean trained with me at the time. And so he's talking about the fights, and typical Chael fashion, he's like, "Yeah, I'm undefeated. Nobody's ever beat me. I'm the middleweight champion of the UFC." and Sean goes, "Well, sir, sorry, I'm gonna have to call you on that. My coach Jeremy Horn, in fact, has beat you 3 times." And without missing a beat, Chael's like, "Well, who are you gonna believe? Me or your own lying eyes?" So, but yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great performer, and he does an incredible job of selling fights.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea that scar was from you. I watch him sometimes on YouTube. I'm gonna look at it different now and chuckle.
Yeah, that's me.
You fought Anderson Silva.
I did, yes.
How did that go?
Not well. We fought in a show called Gladiators, I believe it was. In the Asian market for fights, there's some shady people here and there behind the scenes.
Sure.
And so they will put together an organization, they'll do a show, and then you'll never hear from them again. They'll open up under another name.
Yeah.
And it's generally the same people running the show. So we fought in a show. I believe we fought in I think it was Seoul, Korea. For a show called Gladiators, a 2-day show, and we were the main event for the second night. And I knew who he was. He had fought in Shudo a couple of times. It was before his time in the UFC. Yeah. I knew who he was. I knew how good he was. But again, I just thought, man, I don't care. If I get a hold of you, and if I can drag you down, I can beat you. Mm-hmm. I knew he was hard. He was, hell on wheels on his feet, great striker. But I'm like, I don't care. If I get a hold of you on the ground, I'm going to beat you. Mm-hmm. And so we go out there in the first round. I shoot. He sprawls. I go to pick him up, and he did something funny. He reached under my leg and just kind of sprawled, kind of stopped me, and I pulled a muscle in my groin really bad. Mm. And you can see it if you watch the fight. There's clips of it online here and there. I'm underneath him. I step up and I go to stand up, and my leg buckles, and I go back down to my knees. And then I ended up fighting my way back to my feet anyway. And but I knew something popped, and I knew something was going to be bad. And so later on in the fight, later on in that round, I pick him up over my head, and I'm thinking, man, my leg it's going numb. Something bad just happened. Mm-hmm. I knew I pulled a muscle really bad or something. I thought, man, I got to kill this guy. I got to end this fight right now, because if this goes any longer, I'm in trouble. Yeah. And so I did kind of a backwards belly flop and tried to put him down right on his head. And he was able to survive that. He tucked his head, got out of the way. And then it was just downhill from there. My leg just stopped working. I'm just dragging my leg around like Frankenstein limping, and he just beat the hell out of me for the rest of that round and the other 2 rounds. I think I was able to take him down once or twice more, just desperately grabbing onto something. But I could barely move. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't push off of my leg. Combined with the fact that he's an incredible fighter, there was nothing I was going to do in that fight except take a beating. So that's right.
I could we could spend months going over every fight that you've ever had, and I don't really want to do that. But what I would like to do, especially with guys that have had long careers, I like to read off some of the more notable fighters that more casual fans are more likely to recognize. I just want to list the fighters that are notable that you've faced in your career.
Okay.
This is going to take a second, and it is impressive as hell, man.
A long list. I've fought pretty much everybody.
Dan Severn, Travis Fulton, Frank Shamrock, Ebenezer Fontes Braga, Chuck Liddell, Takase, Kanahara, Big Nog, Ricardo Arona, Eugene Jackson, Randy Couture, Elvis Sinosik, Akira Shoji, Gilbert Ivel, Aaron Brink, Vernon Tiger White, Forrest Griffin, Babalu, Dean Lister, David Loazo, Chael Sonnen, Anderson Silva, Josh Berkman, Trevor Prangley, Matt Linlin, Jorge Santiago, Court McGee, Nate Marquardt, Rusamal Paul Harris, Sean Salmon, and Talis Latis. Those are just the ones I thought casual fans would know, man.
Yes.
I don't think I'll ever talk to anyone with a greater list of accomplishments in the sport than you. What do you credit your longevity, your durability to? Because most people can't do that.
I think a couple of things. I have always fought, like, grappling has always appealed to me more than striking, just because it makes more sense to me. It's easier, it's safer. I also like it more. It's more mentally challenging for me. So that just my style has always been that way. You know, I started training in martial arts with a self-defense style in mind, right? Like I'm you know, the old school mentality. I'm learning how to defend myself from the local bully. I didn't start like a boxer where like I'm entering into a sport where this is the rule set. I was entering into it from I'm learning how to defend myself. And so grappling just came very naturally to me, grabbing people, getting close to them and trying to choke them. I never got hurt much. And then growing up with two older brothers that beat me constantly, pretty much, I think I just developed, pretty tough and pretty durable from an early age. And then when I started training in martial arts, I was like 12 in a group of grown men. So, you know, I was a 12-year-old kid in a group of grown 220-pound men. And so, again, I just learned how to protect myself, learned how to stay safe, and was a little bit durable. So I was able to make it through quite a few fights without getting hurt.
Okay. You are the fourth member of the Militich fighting team that I have spoke to. I asked Drew, Spencer, and Jens to describe you in the training room because I wanted to share their opinions with you when we talked. So this is what they each had to say. Drew said you could turn him into a pretzel anytime you felt like it, and there was absolutely nothing he could do then or ever to stop it.
That's very kind of him to say, but I don't know if that's entirely accurate. Drew was one of those people that he never quite it never reached the level that he was capable of. Another one, it never quite fought with the potential, reached the potential that he was capable of. But he actually reminded me a lot of Robbie Lawler.
They were friends since high school.
Yeah, just insane power, athleticism. So he was. It's kind of him to say that, but I don't think that's entirely true.
Robbie's been quoted as saying that the hardest punch he's ever been hit with was Drew McFedry.
Yeah, I believe that easily. Yeah, Drew's athletic and strong, obviously, but just gifted with that natural power.
And I have argued with him over his punches. I have always felt like when you watch his punches that he throws them differently than they move differently. There's something different to it. And he just, I tell him it's power and he argues it's speed. And then the next time I say, no, it was your speed. And he tells me it was his power. So who knows? All right. Spencer said, this is a quote, "You are the best there ever was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be."
Wow. These you must have paid these guys a lot for these comments.
No, I can't afford to pay anybody anything.
Yeah, I think Spencer and I really clicked when he first came out there because he has the same mentality I do in that, like, fighting and training was just something that was fun to do. It never really came out as a job. It just kind of sort of became a job when you didn't, Suddenly the
Right.
bills are paid and I don't have to go to work 9 to 5. It wasn't like I'm going to quit my day job and I'm going to become a professional fighter. It was just, I can train all day and I go fight and the bills are paid. So I guess I'm a professional,
Right.
And Spencer always in the gym is always, very analytical, very technique oriented. Was never one of those guys that wanted to do everything through power, wanted to learn how to do everything right.
Yeah.
So yeah, he and I hit it off right away. Great guy. And, like I said, had a similar mindset and a similar approach to fighting. So yeah, we always got along real well.
Okay.
But I don't know if I'm the greatest that ever will be. That's a bit of a
That's what he said. He thinks very highly of you. Jens told me, this is a quote, that you are a sadistic grappling wizard hell-bent on evil on the mats.
I guess that's maybe a little bit closer to reality. Yeah. I mean, I do. I like fighting, and part of the reason I like fighting is because it's kind of fun to hurt people.
That's exactly the picture he painted.
Yeah, it's like, it's kind of hard for people to understand until you've actually been in there and done it. But like, I'm not a malicious asshole that's going to go pick fights with people and hurt people.
Right.
But if somebody's willing to get into the ring with me and risk it, and they're going to try to hurt me, and I like hurting people. It's fun.
Let me ask you this question. You, and I hope you don't get upset at me for saying this. You do not necessarily fit the, especially current, prototypical look of a UFC fighter.
My hair's not purple.
Exactly. Like, for instance, if I saw you and Francis Ngannou walking down the street and had to pick one to mug, I wouldn't pick Francis. No offense.
Sure.
No offense.
Yeah,
Have you ever had anyone try you in life or anything? Have you ever been in a situation where people maybe weren't afraid of you when they should be? Maybe a bar situation, something like that. Does that ever happen?
No, not really. I mean, I had a couple of fights in high school, nothing typical high school crap, but I've always been a hermit. I don't like going out. I don't like going to bars. I don't like going out in public. So my entire life is either spent at the gym or at home with my dogs or playing video games. That's really all I'm interested in.
That explains the lack of struggle and the life of good decision making.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, sir. I want to ask you a couple questions. These are kind of like pick one or the other and tell me why questions, if you don't mind. I've got a few of them. The first one is the most important, and that is pulled pork or brisket.
Ooh, I think brisket, and they're both pretty good. But I think brisket just because I like beef a little more than pork.
Okay.
Not a real decisive answer, but yeah, brisket.
Right on. The reason I ask that question is because all day long when I'm not talking to awesome fighters like yourself, I smoke world champion, award-winning pork and brisket. That's all I do. So if you're ever in Fayetteville, Arkansas, if you get out of Utah and come this way, look me up. I will give you the best barbecue you've ever eaten in your life.
That's a deal.
All right. Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee?
Chuck Norris, because he was actually a fighter.
Very nice. Coffee or energy drink?
Energy drink. I hate coffee.
I'm the same way. Which one you got?
The White Monster.
The man who encouraged me to start interviewing people myself instead of funneling them to him drinks the White Monster every time he comes on. I'm the super ultra mango. Yep, very tangy.
Yeah. So I used to drink a lot of soda. The guys used to give me a hard time. I told you early on when we were talking that I never really did the things that I didn't want to do. Like I trained and I did the things that I like to do because that's all I want to do. And dieting was one of those things. I hated dieting. I never did. Going down to 185 was a nightmare for me because I had to clean up my diet. Right. Honestly, if I had been as dedicated as some of the other people, I probably could have fought at 170. Because I'd walk around at 200 pounds or 202, 203 and be pretty chubby. And so some of these guys today that fight at 170, they're walking around at 195 with a six pack,
Yeah, if not 205. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I hated dieting. So, it was widely known that while I'm training for fights, I'd be sipping Mountain Dew between rounds and eating Oreos and stuff like that. I hate dieting. I always have.
Right.
So I eventually
Dude.
decided to try to get rid of the soda because I want to get rid of the sugar, but I can't stand diet. So I ended up finding the white monster because it's, calorie free. So now
Sure.
I'm ingesting some other unearthly chemical that's going to kill me.
Did you notice 10 pounds disappear as soon as you quit drinking soda?
Yeah, no, I think I probably just replaced it with food.
Got it. All right. Both in their prime, Ali or Tyson?
Man, that's a tough one. That's a question for the ages. I think this is just what I like. I'm not a boxing historian, but I think probably Tyson, and only because I just like his style a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I emulate, and I try to encourage in the fighters at the gym here, because as a grappler, my goal is always to push forward so that I can get a hold of somebody.
Sure.
And so, chest forward, head down, tight defense, lateral movement, always pushing forward. As a shorter fighter, Tyson was always trying to get inside on people.
Yeah.
And that's very complementary to a grappling style.
Okay.
Whereas Ali was always on the outside, looking to keep his distance. And that's just great boxing style. But if you're as a grappler, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
So.
All right. GSP or Anderson?
Man, that's another tough one.
The great one we missed.
Yeah. Man, I think maybe Anderson by just a slight edge. I think their ground game is probably pretty similar. The edge in wrestling goes to St. Pierre a little bit, by just a little bit. But I think the biggest difference would be the striking. St. Pierre is good, but he has a more predictable and orthodox and steady style. He's got great defense. But again, as a grappler, his style was generally, I'm going to strike you as much as I have to until I can get a hold of you.
Mm-hmm.
So he never really flourished in the striking, whereas Anderson was so creative and so technical and so unique. I think he might have been able to put something together and pulled out a win in that one.
I think Anderson would have caught him with a knee coming in for a takedown.
Yeah, something like that. Something weird.
All right. Movies, TV, or video games?
Video games.
All right. Are you on the level of Jens when it comes to playing video games?
Dude, I'm the one that started him playing WoW.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize I was talking to the Godfather here.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So I used to play there's a World of Warcraft game. It was called Warcraft Orcs and Humans. It was do you ever play StarCraft?
I don't think so.
Any other like turn-based strategy games?
I don't get to play much of anything that sounds like something I want to do. I have two daughters and a wife, man. It's girl TV and kid TV.
So this was a game. It was a pretty popular game, but before the MMORPG World of Warcraft came out, I played all those games religiously. And then when WoW came out, I knew what was coming, and I was like, man, I probably shouldn't play this because it's going to take over my life. But I was like, hey, Jens, you ought to give this game a try. You'll really like it. And so he jumped in and got hooked. And then I think I started playing maybe 3 months after he did, 4 months after him. But he was already head and shoulders in going crazy. So.
Gotcha. No, the wife and kids game, I don't really get a chance to watch anything unless it's on my phone. The TVs aren't for me.
I'm not much of a TV watcher anyway. I'd rather do something kind of interactive that I'm participating in. I don't like watching.
Sure. I don't know if you're into either one of these, but I thought being in Utah, it was possible. Hunting or fishing?
Actually, neither. Of the two, I would choose hunting, but I'm an animal lover, so I don't want to kill any animals.
Understand.
But to me, fishing seems incredibly boring. Just throw a line in the water and wait. I could see maybe fly fishing. I don't know much about it, but I could see that being a little more unique, a little more interactive, and skill involved. But hunting, I'm a huge shooter. I'm a big advocate of guns. And I love everything about hunting except killing an animal.
Okay.
You know, tracking, shooting, all the skills that are involved with that. You know, I just
Gotcha.
want one animal.
All right. In your entire career, what is the one dream fight that you would have loved to have had that you didn't get?
I would have loved a rematch with Frank Shamrock.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, you know, obviously everybody saw the first fight, and you know he maybe underestimated me a little bit, but I didn't fight anywhere near to the potential I had then.
Right.
So had we been able to fight again a couple of years later, when I actually had grown a lot as a fighter, yeah, that's when I would have liked to have gotten back. But other than that, I never really cared who I fought, just whoever's across from me.
Gotcha. Who's your favorite fighter ever?
You know, I don't really have a lot of favorites. You know, I have always been a fan of the people that are like highly skillful and also seek to finish fights. Like
Okay.
I don't like boring fighters, but I don't demand that people be reckless and stupid. Right?
Sure.
I don't mind if a fight is a good fight and both guys are pushing hard and it happens to go to a decision. So be it. It's a good fight. So with that being said, guys like St. Pierre, BJ Penn, Anderson Silva, all of those guys are all in my favorites list because just highly technical, highly skillful guys that would go out there and go after people to finish them.
All right.
So I mean, even into modern day, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Sean O'Malley's attitude and the way he acts, but he's a talented fighter.
Yeah.
I can never pronounce any of their names, but Merab, I love his drive. You know, Jan Illa Tuporia, I think is his name.
Tuporia, yeah.
Tuporia. Yeah, his boxing is incredible. So I mean, all these guys, I'm fans of all of them. I love the highly technical guys. They're all my favorites.
How about Tom Aspinall?
He's looking really good. Yep.
That's
I'd really like to see him fight John Jones. That's for sure. I don't know if
we haven't had a chance to see what his cardio's like, but he's the way he moves reminds me almost of Cain Velasquez.
Yeah,
the quickness they do.
Yeah,
very impressive. Okay, it's your birthday party and you're a millionaire, and there's a stage over there with whoever you want playing "Happy Birthday" to you. Who's your favorite band? Who's up on stage?
Tool.
Tool, very nice. Favorite Tool album? Which one?
Actually, all of them. I've got all of them on a playlist. I just listen to them constantly, and I include anything that Maynard's part of. So A Perfect Circle and Tool kind of mixed in there. Yeah. So
okay.
I've seen
I'm an Undertow
Salt Lake 3 or 4 times. I've seen him every time they've been here. So
with the crazy light show and everything.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
and,
they're.
Maynard just got his black belt in jiu-jitsu not long ago, and every time he comes through Salt Lake, I have always hoped to cross paths with him and meet him, but yeah, as of yet, have not been able to. But yeah, I've never I don't really care about fame and stuff like that, and I don't, kind of a funny story. I was cornering one of the guys at the UFC one time. Are you a sports fan at all? Do you follow football?
Sure.
So I don't. I didn't know who anybody was. I don't follow any of that stuff. I don't care. But I was wandering around backstage, and a buddy of mine, Tony Fricklin, trained with us back in Iowa.
Yeah.
He was standing backstage talking to somebody that happened to be backstage. And I come walking by, and Tony's super excited. And he goes, Jeremy, come over here. You got to meet this guy. And I go walking over there. I'm thinking it's a buddy of Tony's. And he goes, Jeremy, this is Marshall Falk.
Wow.
Yeah. And Marshall and I are both looking at each other. I have no idea who he is. He has no idea who I am. We both kind of awkwardly stick out our hands. And I'm like, how you doing? Good to meet you. I got to go now. I'm thinking that he's just a buddy of Tony's that I met him. And I'm sure he's thinking the same thing. This is just a friend of some guy. And so I found out later who he was. He's apparently somebody that's pretty popular in football, but I don't know any of those people. I don't care. Being famous doesn't matter to me.
Right.
I want to meet good people. I want people that have good personalities, and except for Maynard. He's one person that I actually would like to meet. Normally I don't care about any of that stuff, but he's the exception. Would
you rather do karaoke with Maynard or grapple with Maynard?
Oh, grapple for sure.
Okay.
I'd love to roll with him. That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. As I've told you before, part of the reason I do these interviews is to help people who may be struggling with different problems in life. If you had a message to share with people out there that are going through some tough stuff, what would that message be?
Wow, that's a hard one. I don't know if I could really put it into words. I have always been of the mindset that, like, I'm not sure how this. I don't want this to come out wrong, but like I kind of have the mindset of like nothing matters. Nothing is so bad that it's worth giving you grief over.
Okay.
Like, get up the next day and keep going.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to sound kind of like pessimistic, but like I've lived my whole life that way. Like, problems don't raise my pulse. I don't care. There have been times when I was living back in Iowa. I was like, well, rent's due next month and I don't have any money. What am I going to do? Oh, well, I'll just go to the gym. I guess it'll sort itself out. I just don't care. Things like that just don't bother me. I'll figure something out, and I do. So, and that seems kind of like a negative, pessimistic attitude, but really I just feel like, be happy doing what you're doing every day and don't worry about problems. That's kind of how I've lived my life.
It kind of seems like if you worry too much about the crappy past days, you may not be able to focus on the possible good ones coming up.
Of looking at it.
All right. What do you have going on in your life these days? What do you do?
So I run a gym. I'm here in Salt Lake, and I run a gym. It's called Elite Performance here in Sandy, Utah, part of the Salt Lake Metro. So that's what I've been doing for about 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
Just training the next generation of fighters. I also have a pretty close relationship with local law enforcement. So I run a program for them, doing their DT and stuff. So mostly just training. And then I'm a pretty avid competitive shooter as well. So I shoot a lot.
What's your favorite gun to shoot?
I carry a Smith & Wesson M&P. That's
okay.
2.0. That's what I shoot as well. So mostly USPSA, but I'll do a couple of 3-gun matches and rifle, shotgun, stuff like that.
Okay. Do you have any up-and-coming fighters at your gym that we may be seeing in the future?
Yeah, there's a few guys that are coming around. Johan Rubio, Mike Jones, David Maggio, a handful of guys that are just kind of breaking out of the local scene here. So, the bare knuckle fighting championships.
Oh yeah, I've interviewed Jeff Houston and Dustin Peg, and I'm about to interview Christine Ferreira.
Oh yeah. So they're coming a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I think like 2 weeks away, and so Mike Jones, one of my guys, is fighting on their show. So
awesome.
Yep.
I love the bare knuckle boxing. I didn't think I would when it first came out. I really didn't think I would, but I do.
I'm still a little bit torn. I've seen a few fighters that have good technique. That's what I care about with everything. Like I don't want to see stupid brawling. Like if
There's
you're landing
really
punches
bad
while you're
technique
staring at the floor, it's just meaningless to me. I don't care. Like a lucky overhand right that knocks somebody out is not. Who cares?
Sure. Just overhand right after overhand right.
I like the idea of bare knuckle fighting because it kind of goes back to what MMA was when I started.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was just, but I don't like that. I don't like that they still wrap their hands. Like that's not really bare knuckle, right?
Yeah.
Hurting your wrist, hurting your hands. That's part of what it should be in bare knuckle. You can't just recklessly throw punches because your hands are taped up like bricks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not exactly bare knuckle.
What is the best way for friends and fans of Gumby to keep up with you these days?
Well, I don't do a whole lot of social media. I've got a friend here at the gym that kind of helped me run an Instagram account, but mostly just posting stuff about the gym. That's probably the best way. I have a Facebook account, but I'm lurking on there a lot, looking for videos of dogs and stuff like that. But I don't post a whole lot on social media. So I guess the best way to come keep in touch with me is come train at the gym.
There you go. Are you a big dog lover? I saw one pooch walking around in the background a little while ago.
Yeah. I've got a couple. He's laying there like he's dead, and this is.
Let's see the puppy.
This is Marley.
Oh, hi Marley.
And the other guy's laying here. I'll see. Buffy, come here. This is little Pomsky.
Aw.
Yes.
Hello, puppy. That's awesome. You're such a normal guy. You're not some terrible face smasher, Jeremy.
Well, so that's the thing. Like, I love animals. I don't like people. So I'll smash people.
I have a lot of friends like that. I'm out of questions, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. Not particularly, I guess. My life is at this point, it's kind of boring. I just hang out with the dogs and I do karate with my friends in the garage. That's about it.
That's awesome. Did we just become best friends?
Exactly.
All right, Jeremy, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the channel tonight. I always do this and say thank you. I don't mean to. It just happens. Thank you so much for coming on here. You are helping someone live out their dreams. You're helping me inspire people in my community, and you're helping me teach my children to never give up and chase their dreams. So thank you very much for coming on tonight, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
It'll take about an hour for this to upload, and I'll send you a copy as soon as it does.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Have a great night.
Thanks.